during the NFC divisional playoff game between the Green Bay Packers and the San Francisco 49ers, something happened that we didn't expect. This is a NASCAR channel. It's a racing channel. We talk about multiple motorsports, but it's mainly a NASCAR channel. You may be wondering, why am I talking about the 49ers Packers game? Well, some major news for NASCAR dropped during this game. Of course, the 49ers Packers game is on Fox with Fox Sports, of course, and they've been promoting, the first couple of races of the season, and they promoted the Busch Clash, which will be at the LA Coliseum, and the Daytona 500, the Great American Race. Well, it was announced during this football game that Tony Stewart, the three-time champion, would be joining Clint Bowyer and Mike Joy in the booth for both of those races. And then after that, we'll talk about that later, but Tony Stewart in the booth for a NASCAR Cup Series race on Fox Sports with Clint Bowyer is going to be great, okay? Now, look, we've talked about broadcasts before. We've talked about who's in the booth, how it's entertaining, how sometimes it's a little dull, and we've all had different opinions. Now, look, I'm a Jeff Gordon fan, so I'm biased, but he did all right in the booth. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he was great, he was the best, but I thought he did a decent job. When he left, I was like, okay, that's fine. I can live without that. But, I was curious to see who they would fill the booth in with, and for the first two races, it's going to be Tony Stewart. After that, it will actually be a mix of talent. They will bring in some other people to do the booth. That third spot will be rotated throughout the Fox Sports portion of the season, which I found very interesting. I'm curious to see who they get in there. Maybe Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson's going to be running full-time IndyCar, so he won't be able to do a lot, but there are some open weekends. Their season, I believe, starts later, so that could be an interesting one. You could maybe get a Ryan Newman if he doesn't have a ride. Heck, you could bring Darrell Waltrip back for a race or something. I don't know. But Tony Stewart is who we're going to focus on today because this, in my opinion, is a great move. Now, Tony Stewart is one of the great personalities in NASCAR. He drove for quite a number of years. He won 3 NASCAR Cup Series championships in 2002, 2005 and 2011. 2011 being with his own race team, Stewart-Haas Racing, and one of the most memorable championships in recent NASCAR history, if not all of NASCAR history, when it came down to the final race between him and Carl Edwards, and he beat Carl Edwards to win the race at Homestead and to win the championship. But here's what Tony Stewart had to say. He posted something on the Twitters, and he said, "I'm teammates with Clint Bowyer again. Mike Joy will have his hands full. This is going to be fun." Yes, Mike Joy will have his hands full. Of course, Mike Joy, one of the most known voices in NASCAR. He is an absolute legend in the booth. He has had some amazing calls. One of the most memorable being the 1998 Daytona 500, 20 years of trying, 20 years of frustration. Dale Earnhardt wins the Daytona 500. Everyone knows that if you're a NASCAR fan. But Clint Bowyer, he is a great personality. He is a great character too, and him and Stewart are going to clash well, I think. They've worked with each other for quite a few years. Bowyer drove for Tony Stewart from 2017 to 2020, so they have a close relationship. They've worked together before, so they know each other quite well. The Gordon-Bowyer dynamic, so before Gordon and Bowyer, it was just Gordon and Mike Joy, and it wasn't terrible, but it was lacking something. And it was you could tell it was lacking something. There wasn't enough enthusiasm, per se, in that booth. And that's nothing against Gordon. That's nothing against Mike Joy. They don't need to change their personalities to appeal to the crowd when, it's not exactly their fault. They don't have someone in there to kind of spice things up. And then when Bowyer retired after the 2020 season last year, they brought in Clint Bowyer. So they add a big personality. They add a guy who, is very... I'm trying to think of the word, but he's very excited. He loves it. He loves talking about racing. He loves racing, and he's very vocal about it, I guess. But they add him in there, and I thought that was a pretty good group. It's not the best, but I thought, if I have to listen to this for a few years, that would be pretty nice, You got Mike Joy being himself, which is perfect. You got Gordon and Bowyer going back and forth. Sometimes they contradicted each other a bit, but overall, I thought they were very entertaining. You had Gordon say something, then you had Bowyer say something. They joked with each other a bit, which was fun. But then it was announced that Gordon was going to be leaving to take a higher up position at Hendrick Motorsports, which that was expected. We can talk about that whole other thing, but Gordon, it was expected that he would go to Hendrick one day to be a higher up because he's being groomed to take over Hendrick Motorsports. But then after Gordon announced that, it was like, all right, who's it going to be? And with all that's happened over the past 6 months in NASCAR, we've had the playoffs, we've had major free agent shifts in NASCAR, Brad Keselowski going to Roush Fenway and actually becoming a part owner. We've had Austin Cindric get bumped up to the Cup Series, not only to be in the Wood Brothers, but he got bumped up again to go to Team Penske. We've had a lot of major shifts over the past few months that have been just, big news cycles. And, the Fox Sports booth just hasn't really been thought about, hasn't been talked about that much. And finally, we got something tonight. They could have done it a lot of ways. They could have tried to hype it up. They could have been like, ooh, it's a mysterious person. Who's it going to be? And 2 weeks later, announce it. But honestly, I feel like this is the most epic way to drop it simply because it didn't get leaked, which these days is incredible when news doesn't get leaked, especially something this big. And two, the way they dropped it was just so casual, and it was such a big bombshell for NASCAR fans. If you're watching this football, it's a major football game too. It's the NFL playoffs, probably a very watched game with two very passionate fan bases, the 49ers and the Packers, watching at home if they're not at the game. But, they were just like, promotion here, our self-promotion for Fox. We got the Daytona 500 and the Clash coming up. Oh, by the way, this legend guy named Tony Stewart's going to be in the booth. I hope you enjoy it. NASCAR fans everywhere just rejoice. Oh, Tony Stewart, let's go. But back to Tony Stewart, a great personality in the sport. He has had some very memorable quotes. And this one, it's not just one of my favorite in NASCAR history. It's one of my favorite interviews in sports history. But when Stewart goes on that rant after Talladega, one of the Talladega races that had a bunch of crashes, he went on this long rant and said, all right, we got to scrap it. We got to get rid of everything. We got to start running figure eights. We got to run cars going the other way, trying to dodge each other from head-on collisions. He went on this long rant. One of the funniest things ever. I could watch that 20 straight times a day for the rest of my life, and I would laugh every time because that's genuinely one of the greatest media pieces that Tony Stewart has given us, and that is his personality. I love his personality. I love Tony Stewart. Him and Bowyer, I think, are going to mesh extremely well in the booth because, they're two unique personalities. They're friends. They're close. They have worked together before. And then you've got the legend, the icon, Mike Joy with them to try to calm things down. I mean, you can't let Stewart and Bowyer get too out of hand, That'd be something if Bowyer and Stewart just took over the booth. But also, I think it's huge that Stewart's doing these two races, the first ever Clash at the LA Coliseum. That's probably the most anticipated race of the year, if I had to guess, just because it's, one, a new track. A new track is always highly anticipated, but two, it's in an iconic football stadium in Los Angeles. That is like the triple dragon head meme thing where it's like, the triple dragon. I don't know what that meme's called, but that is going to be huge. That's going to be a highly anticipated race. I think it's going to be a very highly rated and watched race in terms of TV and stuff, but getting Stewart in that booth, I think, is going to be huge because of his personality, because of who he is, but also his knowledge of race cars and racing. He's raced with some of these guys in the field. He's been the boss of some of these guys in the field and is the boss of some of the guys in these field. I mean, he only retired 5 years ago, so he's raced with, I want to say, a majority of these guys. I mean, even some of the younger guys, Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson, he's raced against some of these guys, or a good chunk of these guys. So, he knows how they race. He knows what they do. He knows, I don't know if he's tested a next-gen car, but he knows how to short-track race. So, I think that's a great addition to the booth in that aspect. And then for the Daytona 500, if you love Stewart at the Clash, you'll love him at the 500, hopefully. Now, the ultimate irony is that, he hasn't won a 500. But, he's still a Hall of Fame NASCAR driver. He's won at super speedways. He knows how to get it done at super speedways. This isn't like a Tony Stewart diss, but I just think that's ironic, and it's just a random point. But beside that, he's got so much knowledge of racing, of race cars, of NASCAR. He's got other racing ventures. He's racing dirt. He's got his dirt team. He's got SRX. He's got, I think he's got a drag race team now. I mean, Tony Stewart, he may have retired from full-time cup racing, but he is still a busy guy. So to get him on the schedule for a couple races, I think is huge. But another thing is that if Stewart is a home run out of the park, like, look, I'm the kind of guy, I lower my expectations because then if something like average or just meh happens, I'm happy because, you know, you lower your expectations, then the meh makes you happy. But anyways, I have high expectations for this. That's my point. I like this idea. And if it goes well, as we said earlier, there's going to be a rotation of talent. Maybe if you could later on in the season, if Tony Stewart's a home run, out of the park grand slam, if you could maybe get him for a few races later in the Fox Sports season, I think that would be awesome. You know, some places that I think he would have that would be great to have Tony Stewart in is some road courses maybe. Tony Stewart was a great road course racer. Maybe get something like, I'm trying to think. I don't know, but you know, if these first two races, well, I don't think they'll get Tony Stewart full-time because I don't think Tony Stewart would want to do this full-time, but I wouldn't be shocked if these first two races are successes with him if they were to get someone else or to get him for some more races. But as for the rest of it, they're going to rotate talent for the third position, as we said earlier in this video. Some candidates, in my opinion, once again, Jimmy Johnson, maybe bring Jeff Gordon back for a race, maybe bring Darrell Waltrip back for a race if we're just having fun with this third position. But I think the possibilities are endless. You could do something like with what NBC did for the throwback race when they had it. They would bring in the old broadcasting. They had Ned Jarrett in the booth, some of these guys who used to call races. You can maybe do something like that. But, you know, I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be very interesting to see how this is, but I have high expectations. I think this will be a really fun group. And then also after the Daytona 500, I think it will be extremely interesting and intriguing to see who they put in that booth and to see who does good and who doesn't do good. We've seen the Xfinity Series. They do current Cup drivers. They rotate that position in the booth. We've seen Kurt Busch, who I think is amazing in the booth. We've seen Joey Logano, Kevin Harvick, Austin Dillon, Brad Keselowski. We've seen a lot of guys in the booth, and I think it'll be interesting. You know, obviously you can't get current Cup guys, but maybe get some retired Cup guys, some recently, maybe they don't have a ride in Cup this year. So I think it could be interesting. I really do. I'm really excited about this. I think this is great. I'm very excited for this. I think this is a great move by everyone at Fox, NASCAR, whoever's decision this was. Great job. Great job. But I'm excited for NASCAR to come back. We're only I think we're only 2 weeks away from the Clash. Wow, time flies. This offseason has kind of flown by, but I'm so excited for racing to be back. I've missed it, but Tony Stewart in the booth, I'm excited. Hopefully you are too. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. And, man, I hope you guys are as happy as I am that Tony Stewart's going to be in the booth with Clint Bowyer and Mike Joy. Have a great rest of your night.